Welcome to Schmidt List. Our guest today is Brad Farris, a renowned leadership and business growth coach. If you're facing the challenges of scaling your business, you need to hear Brad's expert insights. Get ready for game-changing advice that will help elevate your leadership and take your business to the next level. Don't miss it. Tune in now.
How are you today?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, tell me a little bit about the work you do and who you work with.
I'm a leadership and business growth coach. I work primarily with founders of growing agencies, and people come to me when they feel like they need to level up their leadership. And so agencies go through some predictable stages of growth. And when you're at one of those growth boundaries, the job of the leader changes pretty significantly. And I'm really helpful in getting people across those boundaries.
Great. I've got so much to learn from you today, Brad. Myself, I went through this very early on in my career too, where you're a craftsperson and you're starting to get work and you're like, you know what, maybe I can turn this into a real thing and I'm going to make it into a real thing. We're going to do it. And you start doing it and you get employees and things are coming along pretty good. You're all having fun, getting along. And then all of a sudden it starts to get weird. And then I'm not doing my work as much as I used to. And people are asking me for things that I don't know how to provide. And I'm like, why are you asking me for these things? You shouldn't worry about that stuff. And let's worry about the clients and the work. And they're like, no, let's worry about my benefits and you're like, what's going on? Why did I even get into this? I'm sure that's a very unique situation, Brad. I'm sure.
Very unique. You're the only person in the world that's ever had that experience.
So as that's a thing, how do you describe and coach people through that initial transformation? Because I'm sure you work with people that are in quick growing places.
Yeah.
One of your first things, like, if you're not alone. So how do you start your coaching with these folks?
So we're always starting where the person is. And so the scenario from a couple of years ago, that's a great place to start and say, yes, I see that all of a sudden your job is not what you used to do. You used to do coding, or you used to be a designer, or you used to be a writer. And now all of a sudden you're leading all these people. And that's actually a different job, right?
Yeah.
When you were doing the thing, when you were the craftsperson, you knew at the end of the day that you had a good day because you created things. There are artifacts of your work that are out in the world, right? When you're leading, other people have artifacts of their work that's out in the world, and your job is to make it possible for them to do their job. And that feels super amorphous. Like, I get to the end of the day and I had a bunch of meetings, but I didn't do anything, right? There was nothing that I accomplished, that I delivered. And so there's a big shift in identity that needs to take place when we get to that point where we're starting to pull away from the work. And for a lot of people, they fight it because it feels good to do that thing that I used to be good at. And it feels really uncomfortable to be in that leadership role. And so I want to go back to being in the doing the work role. But then, just as you experienced, your people are like, yeah, but this is my job. That's your job. And so if no one does the leader job, now we've got a whole mess on our hands.
It is because, and also what happens I've seen is the culture starts to split as the company grows. You've got the old school people that have been there from the beginning, or just a few, maybe depending on your turnover rate, but sometimes it's a good chunk of people. And then you've got the new class, right? The new class that's come in, and they have very different expectations than the old school. Because the old school was like, yeah, I'll leave when the work is done. And other people, the new classes, the whistle blows at 5, I'm laptops down, all this stuff. So just an example.
Yeah.
And you start to see people working different, and that clash starts to happen. And I remember being an owner and wondering, which side is the right side? Which side is right here? Is it the new class just doesn't get it and they need to adapt? Or is it the old class needs to adapt? And then I remember thinking, it's probably me who needs to adapt.
So there's two things in there that I see that are really common. One is when we start a business, what's important is flexibility. We don't have enough people that we have people to do all the jobs. So everyone's wearing multiple hats and we're juggling multiple balls. And so we value the flexibility that those first few employees bring. But as the business grows, we're going to start to hire specialists. So we hire an account person, and the account person's job is to take care of the clients and bring in new business and price things and make sure things are done on time, right? And we hire a creative director whose job is to make sure that the creative team is doing well. And those people want to be able to say, I'm doing my job well. Mm-hmm. That requires accountability. So we need to have more accountability as we start to hire those professionals. But the people that love the flexibility, they don't really like the accountability, right? And so they start to say, yeah, but I'm here all the time and I do all this extra stuff. And doing all that extra stuff was really valuable, but it's not really valuable as the business starts to grow, because the accountability is what allows us to grow the business further.
Yeah, and the company is changing, right? And unless you had experience ahead of time, it's really hard to guide and set expectations with the staff as the company grows. Because if I was starting an agency today and I was hiring people, I would let them know, this is the roadmap over the next year or two. And this is how I see your role changing and adapting to that. This is how I see the company's policies changing and adapting to the work and things that we're doing, and allowing that transparency. But if you've never been through that before, you are on the bleeding edge of change every single day. And that could take a toll on you, because I've seen founders and I've had partners before in the past where they really struggle with the change of being an implementer to a leader. It's hard to let go of that, just like you said, because they provided so much value. Yes. And now all the value is just air and conversations, Brad. Like, how is that valuable?
And that disconnect that you're feeling of, am I wrong? Are they wrong? What's going on here? A lot of people will come to me at that point and they'll say, Brad, there's something wrong with my staff. They're just not doing the things that I told them to do. And I have to have a hard conversation with them there that says, oh, so there's something wrong with the staff that you hired and that you trained and that you're holding accountable?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, there's something wrong with all of that. It's the same. I used to have good partners call it the bad roommate syndrome. Like, I've always had bad roommates my entire life. I don't know why. What's wrong with all these roommates?
And so we get to that point, like you say, that I'm now leading the biggest organization I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable, but I'm the boss. So I'm not allowed to have a problem. I'm not allowed to be the one that's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it's really great to have someone who can come alongside you and say, okay, here's where this goes, right? I've been down this road before. And as you and I were talking before we got on, I've made all these mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so valuable to have a support group around you. And I know that a lot of people, at least locally here where I'm at, there's lots of leadership cohorts and things like that I think are important. But early on, I joined one of these and I really struggled because all of these people had more traditional businesses, not an agency business, not a service-based business. And there is just a different pace and attitude and mentality that you take towards this work. And especially because you add on, like, it's a service-based business. So yeah, I could talk to somebody who runs a plumbing company, right? But it's not as creative as what I'm dealing with, and nebulous, right? Where you've got dozens of revisions to copy and things and setting expectations around those things, both internally and externally. Whereas this is how you put a sink together. And if you don't put it together like this, you're dumb. You can't do that in an agency, in a creative and a digital agency. So talk to me, Brad, about what you usually suggest. Maybe they're not quite ready to join in with Brad, but what are some other things that you tell people to do as they're exploring the leadership journey? What's some tips and tricks that you would suggest?
So one kind of practical thing, if you go to my website and go to anchoradvisors.com/growth-phase, and I'm sure I'll put that in the show notes, there's an assessment there that helps you to see where you are on the growth journey of an agency. And oftentimes we're getting advice when we're in the startup phase or we're in the growth phase that are really more appropriate for later stages of business. And so really focusing on where am I right now in growing my business, and what are the few things that matter in this phase? And so if you take the assessment, it doesn't require an email or anything. It'll give you a map of the next 3 things you need to pay attention to. And one of them that is very common is we have job descriptions for everyone in the company, but we don't have a job description for the CEO. And knowing what your job is and figuring out a way to measure your performance is super helpful.
Yeah, that's an incredibly good idea, because I've had that before where as you grow, I had people saying, so what do you do here?
The old office space thing.
Yeah, it was a do here. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't list it out. But then I did. I was like, all right, I'm going to list it all out.
Yep.
And then I put together a presentation for the team, and I walked everybody through what does like a week in Kurt's life look like. And it wasn't that impactful for them. I think they were, okay, yeah, you do stuff. But for me, it was really, really helpful.
And the second part that you mentioned there is something that I do a lot with clients is, okay, once I decide what my job is, how do I make sure I have a time? I usually do 2-week blocks. There's some time in each 2-week block that I'm doing each of those jobs, right? I'm looking at the finances once every couple of weeks. I'm doing some business development every week. I'm working with the team and seeing where the weaknesses and strengths are and where the holes are in the team, probably every week or at least every other week, right? And so there are these roles that we have to play. And unless we have time on our calendar to do them, it's real easy to fill the calendar with hires, calling clients, stuff like that.
Yeah, not being intentional with your time is a huge part of it, and taking ownership of it. I want to talk to you about traditional frameworks and things too. As a coach, I've had some people come in and pitch us in our agency at the time on different things, right? And during my tenure, I was helping a very large agency. We were 500 some people, and we were doing all the things. We were doing StrengthsFinder, Myers-Briggs, DISC. There's a ton of them. And what's your take on those sorts of approaches when it comes to leadership development? How impactful have those things been in your experience? And is it a certain type of person that it works for? Is it all just voodoo? Tell me what you think.
Some of those are voodoo. I heard someone describe Myers-Briggs as like horoscopes for people with PhDs.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
I do have a personality typing tool that I use, and I start every coaching engagement by looking at that personality typing tool. And mostly what I'm looking for there is, how do I position this person to play to their strengths? If you think about the job of a football coach or a sports coach, is to get people to do into roles where they can be successful. You as the CEO want to get your team into roles where they can be successful. Understanding where people's natural tendencies are can help us to do that. The other thing is, and this is going to come as a huge shock to you, not everyone sees the world the same way that you do.
Whoa, okay, wait a second.
They'll communicate differently from you.
That's insane.
It is insane. And so when we can see what other people's personalities are, every time I do this, I'm doing this right now with a team of 15 people where we're putting everybody's personalities up and talking about it. And I know when we do that, there are going to be some that people are like, oh yeah, I knew about this person. And there are going to be others who will be like, oh, I did not know that about that person.
But that explains a lot, right?
Exactly, right. This is why we keep having this fight over and over. And so
it's like the love languages kind of thing, and how powerful that was back when it first came out, because that's something that I spent time with my partners really trying to understand, because I had one partner that was very high energy, high anxiety, and the other was Eeyore. Just rolled with whatever and was like, oh, yeah, it's on fire again. Both great individuals. I learned a lot from working with them, but being the person in the middle, the kind of mid-anxiety, mid-Eeyore that I am, worked out great to split the difference. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing that I wonder about, Brad. When you're I'm sure you've worked with partnerships.
Yes.
Before, and those bring a whole new level of challenges compared to being just top boss, right? And obviously, there's not one that's easier than the other, but I do know a lot of solo people that are like, oh, what I need is to get a partner. And I'm like, do you? Because does that fix things, really? I want somebody to share the responsibility with. And I'm like, again, do you really want somebody to share the responsibility? Think about this. Think about what it's like 5 years from now, not next week, because you don't want to do all these meetings by yourself.
That's right.
Talk to me about the differences in the dynamics with how the leaders are when you're working with them in a partnership, and what are the things that you coach those people on what to be aware of?
If I'm going to say good things about partnerships, there are definitely times where partners have different strengths and different skills.
100%, yes.
And divide and conquer the work. And I will say that partnerships early on tend to grow a little bit faster because you have more of those diverse skills. And so getting a business off the ground is often easier with partners. As you were saying, as the business grows, you can hire a lot of those diverse skills, right? And so the roles for those two partners start to get really ambiguous.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I'm doing a lot when I'm working with partners is establishing clear roles for each of the partners with measurements, so that one of the most toxic conversations for partners is, I'm doing more than she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
No way to resolve that.
Because, I mean, it happens in any work environment. The work ethic that people have is different. And some are different in good ways and some are different in negative ways. And when it's a partnership, it's really pronounced versus this is just your partner on this project, because this project can end at some point and you'll probably move on to a different thing with somebody else or whatever. So you just put up with it. You knew that Steve acts this way and you can just get around it, right? But when a partnership, you are married.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Like, you can't escape.
And the thing that is interesting, because I've been doing this for a while, is that if you see partners and at the very beginning, they're like 98% aligned, but their 2% is not aligned. 10 years later, that 2% is now a big misalignment.
Yeah. And they don't plan for that to happen either, right? They don't see that it's all flowers and daisies in the beginning, right? And because you're grinding towards the same goals, but people change and people grow. And that's the bottom line. So to your point, that's one of the first things that I usually talk to people about when they ask me about partnerships or these things, is that you just got to realize that you're not going to be the same person 5 years from now that you are now. You're just not going to be. And even though you might argue and say, I am the same person I was 5 years ago, this business is going to change you. It just is. And it's not a job. It's a new lifestyle for you.
That's right.
And that changes people.
And even if it's just life circumstances, like I worked with one pair of partners where they were roughly the same age, but one of them married young and the other one married late. And so the one that married had kids young. And by the time 15 years went by, partner one, his kids were graduating. He's thinking about riding off into the sunset.
Sure.
Kids are young. He still needs to send them to college, right? And so even if professionally they're super aligned, personally, their needs are really different.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something to really discuss and be intentional about. And that's why I think having an outside third party, like someone like yourself coming in to coach in these areas, is so powerful and so important. And early on in my career, like I was like, nobody understands me and what I'm dealing with. And the only person who can fix my problems is this guy right here, me. And that just, as I got older and more mature and saw other people having success with bringing outside people, then I was like, oh crap, like I missed the boat there and I need to bring in those people. I was also lucky because I didn't have a scarcity mindset. I had an abundance mindset. I was able to connect and reach and talk to other agency founders and owners and have coffee with them once in a while. And if lack of anything, I got a chance to vent to somebody who understood what was happening. And that was really powerful for me because I was reading all the books, right? I was reading all the leadership books. And if you go to Amazon, I think it's, 550,000 titles with just the word leadership.
Yes.
There's like over 500,000 books in Amazon with just the title leadership somewhere in the title. And I read tons of that, and I would have people recommend books and I'd read them. And then it still just didn't have the same impact as working with someone to get me to that next level, having that coach to get me to the level that I really wanted to be, or realize that maybe my job was just to start things, but not to run. You ever run into that?
Yes. I think that for many people who tell me that, my job is to start things and not to run things.
Yeah.
The identity shift of going from the craftsman to the leader is just something that they're not willing to make, which is fine.
And I like that you put it, it's not that they're unable to make.
That's right.
They're not willing to make. That's a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah. Because I have seen people that say that to me. And if we sit down and talk about what it really means, one of the ways that I talk to them about it is, remember when you got so much joy from creating the thing, the piece of software, the design, whatever it is. What if you could get that same joy from creating the system, the people aspect of the business, like putting the people in place and making, if that is your creative act and start to see it that way, that's a big unlock for people. Now, there are some people that just don't care about people. They care about things, and they should go and work with the things. That's fine. But the challenge and this is my own personal bias, I'm going to put that out there. I think the challenge of solving the people problems is so much more interesting than solving the thing problems.
I would 100% agree. And I didn't think that early on in my career either. I fought against it too. But as I saw the impact that my leadership had on other people, it was so much more satisfying than any artifact I could ever make. And it was so much more validating to all the crap that I had been through in my career and everything. It was hugely impactful for me. So I can totally see the people that embrace it, really it can be life-changing for them. Because I say it all the time. People forget projects, people forget jobs, but they never forget their bosses or their managers or
their
whoever.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like when we get to that point in life that we start thinking about legacy and what we want to be remembered for, it's definitely our impact on the people on our team. That's the thing that people are going to remember. And so getting good at making a positive impact there is really impacting your legacy.
And if you the point where you're at in life, legacy is behind you, but reputation is ahead of you. And they both are really important to take care of, right? So if you're not maybe your legacy meter is much shorter, but your reputation bar is really high because you're maybe in your 30s. If you're not taking care of these people or working with these people, they're going to go and get jobs other places. And they're going to carry whatever baggage you handed them at the door with them. And they will share that baggage with everybody and anybody for the next 40 years.
That's true. And you just unlocked something for me that I never really thought about before, is that investing in your leadership actually makes the rest of your life so much easier. Because if you have that reputation of being a great leader and making a positive impact on the people around you, you're going to attract better talent. When you attract better talent, it's so much easier to run your business. It makes more money. Like it's like having a tailwind, right?
And better, but it's particular because better talent will attract better clients or retain clients longer. And then it just all works together. So to your point, if you're not focused on the leadership side of things, you're dismantling a key link in the chain of making your business successful. And if you're not interested in making your business successful, then I suggest go get a job. Like you're going to be much happier. Don't do this.
Or have a solo gig. Like you can have a solo gig. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I have essentially a solo gig. You have essentially a solo gig. There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. But again, don't fool people, because if you already worked and built this agency, and I know people who really essentially just want lifestyle agencies, and that's okay, but those have the same challenges that you would if you were in a growth mode. They're just peanut buttered out more. It's just more time.
One of the conversations that I have with clients that's like, Brad, I love this business at this size. I just want to keep it this size, right? Like, that's great. Certainly you want that. Does your team want that? Do they want more opportunities? Are they expecting to get raises, gain more responsibility? Because if so, and you don't want to grow the business, they're going someplace else.
Yeah, you got to plan for turnover.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's just now what's coming with that choice, right? And usually when I do that, people are like, yeah, that's not so good. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. I remember with this agency I was at, we were fast growing. We were adding 100 people a year. And I remember at an all staff, one employee got up, and I think we were like 200 people on our way to 500 very quickly. And they said, why do we keep growing? And I remember the CFO just was like, or no, the employee said, why don't we stop growing? Why don't we just stop? And the CFO just looked back at him. He was up in front with all the other executives doing a Q&A. And he's, why don't you stop growing? He's like, if you stop growing, we could stop growing.
That's right.
Problem is that you're not going to stop growing.
That's right.
And so the business has to grow in order to keep you here and employed and doing the work and providing you the opportunities you're looking for. And I remember that person just being floored. Oh, okay. I get it. Like they had just unlocked why businesses grow in the first. It wasn't just because you watch the news and you're like stocks and stockholders and shareholder value, all this stuff. But when you're in a small to medium-sized business, people don't have that mentality of growth equals opportunity for me. That's for Teslas and the NVIDIAs of the world, not our little agency here in Oklahoma or something.
And it's growth is a beautiful thing. Like our desire for growth and our desire to learn more and have more opportunity, that has created almost all the good things that we have in the world. And to try to stifle that is you're working against nature. That's not how the world works.
Yeah, we don't want to work against nature. We see what happens when we do that. You think you got a better idea. Guess what? Nature's got better ideas.
It's definitely a force that I don't want to fight against.
No. All right. Speaking of forces I don't want to fight against, we gotta cut it short here. But Brad, I love having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. We got to have you back on. If I want to get in touch with you, if I want to learn about your services, if I want to take that survey that you mentioned and I want to learn more, where do I go? How do I find out more?
AnchorAdvisors.com, AnchorAdvisors.com is my website. That's the easiest place to find me. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you search Brad Farris, there aren't very many of us. Farris with an A. But yeah, come on to AnchorAdvisors.com. The assessment, like I said, is AnchorAdvisors.com/growth-phase. 10 questions, takes you 5 minutes. It's going to really give you some help about what to focus on next.
That's great. I love those surveys. They give you some really great instant feedback, especially when they're put together by such a smart and talented person like Brad here. I highly recommend people go and check it out. Brad, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to join me. I appreciate it.
It was super fun. It's always interesting to talk with you.
We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode of Schmidt List. The stories shared by our guests are genuinely inspiring and offer insightful knowledge. It's important to remember that success doesn't happen overnight and requires collaboration, learning, and perseverance. If you want to broaden your professional connections, check out Kurt's book, The Little Book of Networking: How to Build Your Career One Conversation at a Time, on Amazon. Please stay connected with all things Schmidt List on social media, leave a review for the podcast, and join our community of like-minded entrepreneurs. Thank you for being part of Schmidt List. Keep innovating, collaborating, and chasing your entrepreneurial dreams.